Hi guys, welcome to Office Blokes React. I'm Office Bloke Dave.
I'm Office Bloke Mike.
I'm Office Bloke Daz.
Collectively, we're the Office Blokes, aren't we?
We are.
Aye.
Are we winning the Microchip war? The Office Blokes?
No, our chips are too big with the fish.
I like the big fat chips,
Yeah, same.
personally. Bit
Yeah,
of mayo,
yeah.
salt and vinegar.
Yeah, the microchips taste like shit.
Yeah.
Not enough potato in them for me.
Yeah. Well, we've solved that then,
You have
right?
something to dip them in as well, haven't you?
Well, how do you dip a microchip? You'd have to have a micro
Micro
dip as
ketchup.
well.
Just pick it up and dip it in.
It was a microchip, it's tiny.
Micro ketchup, tiny little
Tweezers,
tub.
mate.
It's like a tiny little tub. Or you can get a microchip in a massive tub and just soak it.
But then you
Soak
lose
your fingers
you
as
just,
well.
You just lose
You
it.
won't. You keep it all. You keep on your fingers, and you go like that and put your whole finger in. You just can't double dip.
Or you just get
After
like
you bit it.
a big scoop full of microchips, put them all in a bowl, stir them up, and then you've got a few in every bite.
That's
Wow.
soup.
That is soup.
Soup chip.
And also back to your dipping in the sauce. When it becomes more sauce than chip, it's the other way around. You're not
fine.
eating microchips, you're eating sauce with
Yeah.
sprinkled microchips.
Yep. Hundreds of thousands.
Might be,
Loads of them.
You
might be strain off it.
you come to us for
Slightly.
healthy debate, facts. You know, it's
Intelligent debate.
I didn't even know
Extremely.
China made chips anyway. I thought they were all about the rice.
noodles as well.
That's probably what it is. That's maybe rice is a microchip.
Of a noodle, we've solved it. Right then, why China is losing the microchip war? If you're still with us,
It's
which we are.
unlikely.
Hong Cheng-yu left his job as an engineer at a company called ASML, the only company in the world that can make this machine. This machine makes the most advanced semiconductor chips, or microchips, in the world. After he left ASML, he started two new companies, one in the US and one in China. US and ASML lawyers would later allege that Yu recruited other ASML engineers to his US company, that they brought with them stolen information about ASML's machine, and that it was all backed by the Chinese government. This story is just one small piece of China's monumental effort to transform one of the world's most global and significant industries, semiconductors. But China's effort has increasingly locked it in a struggle with the United States.
This isn't about market share. This isn't about tariffs. This is about security.
So, how exactly did China and the US enter into a Cold War over computer chips?
I heard over the weekend that if you were to be able to service everyone on the planet having an electric car rather than an internal combustion engine, they couldn't physically make enough semiconductors to help power the cars. Like this,
Well,
it's a
big
physical
shortage,
impossibility
wasn't
to
it?
do
There's been a
it.
big shortage of semiconductors
Yeah,
since the pandemic.
and the Americans are they're building factories, but they're going to take 10 years before they're viable and actually churning out semiconductors.
Yeah.
But they're in that many things now that allegedly that you literally not everyone in the world could drive an electric car physically. It's just an impossibility.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, if that's the only machine that can do this in the world,
Yeah.
why is it so cheap to have a semiconductor? If I had that only machine, it'd be like, how much? I'd be a massive queue waiting. It'd be like bags of them going out, like diamonds.
I think because they're in our mobile phones, aren't they? They're in
I think you have
all
to
the
make
modern
it-
cars. They're in absolutely everything.
They'd probably have to make them cheap enough for people to buy them en masse, and if not, then people do what the US are doing. They just say, right, we'll build our own then.
Yeah,
Like, yeah, how long is that going to take?
Don't know.
10
Is the
years.
answer.
In the
So don't
meantime,
know.
if you need them, I got some.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've no idea how
Bag of
long
chips.
it physically takes to make one.
Salt and vinegar.
They must have been
it's
making. They
10
must have been
years.
making them in other parts of the world before. They couldn't have been just China making semiconductors. They might have been that.
Just the way he said
Surely.
it. That's the
It's-
way he said it there, didn't it?
I'm not saying having the US knew about semiconductors and they just sat there and thought,
No, I think
we won't bother.
I think one of the things that
It's unlikely.
happened was, you've got to have there was an American company that were having them manufactured in China, so there's got to be like a Chinese part of the company, because obviously everything has to
owned
be a
Chinese
certain
owned,
amount of
state-owned.
state-owned. And there was one where essentially they just took all the intellectual property of the American company and just went, okay. And now they're the company. And the American company have just been left kind of holding the bag like, that's it. But I think it's just one of those things. It's cheaper to outsource it to China. They've made them for everyone and now
Yeah.
biting the bullet sort of thing. We're all speculating. What is a semiconductor? I don't even know what it is. What does it do?
It's a guy who stands at the back of the bus staring at you.
But
You're not allowed on buses full of kids.
He's not the main conductor though.
Yeah.
This is the first semiconductor chip, invented in the 1950s by engineers in the US. It's a piece of silicon with 4 transistors on it. The more transistors, the more powerful the chip. By 1960, engineers had already made one with 4 times the transistors, and each year they figured out ways to add more.
So since the early 1960s, semiconductors have improved at an exponential rate.
This is Chris Miller, author of Chip War.
The founder of Intel, Gordon Moore, predicted in 1965 that the computing power produced by a single chip would double every year or so, and that rate has held true roughly up to the present.
The first companies dedicated to making chips were in the US, where they really just had one main customer, the US government.
The first use cases were actually in guidance computers that were in NASA spacecraft as well as in the missile system.
The complex guidance equipment, the system's electronic brain.
Since chip companies were making better and better chips each year, the US government believed a deep partnership with them would ensure that it always had access to the most advanced ones.
The US government has believed that computing has been a core determinant of nations' power on the world stage. You think about the ways that computing has been used to crack codes in World War II or to track Soviet submarines during the Cold War. I think that judgment is correct.
At first, these chip companies handled the entire supply chain. They designed the chips, manufactured them, and assembled them into a package for installation into a product, all within the US. But by the late 1960s, they realized they could make a lot more money designing chips for civilian products, like corporate computers. They just had to make a lot more of them, and a lot less expensively. So many chip companies moved their manufacturing and assembly to factories in Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, and Hong Kong, where labor was cheaper, and the US government encouraged them. All these countries were US allies or partners, and this was a way to support their economies and deepen ties. At the same time, it banned these chip companies from sharing technology with its rivals, the Soviet Union and China. It was a way to keep them years behind the US as chips advanced.
Because of Moore's law, advanced chips are substantially better than previous generations. If you're 5 years behind or 10 years behind, you're actually quite far behind the cutting edge.
But it wasn't long before these allied governments began investing in their own chip companies. In the 1970s and 80s, Toshiba in Japan and Samsung in South Korea began designing and manufacturing chips that rivaled the Americans. And in the 1990s, a Taiwanese company, TSMC, got so good at manufacturing chips that many companies in the US stopped doing it. It meant that US companies were not the only ones who could make the most advanced chips anymore. And every country's chip industry was increasingly reliant on other countries for the materials, software, and equipment needed to make more complex chips. But while the US and its allies were pushing the limits of chip technology, China was lagging behind. In addition to the US blocking it from accessing chips during the Cold War, many of China's brightest scientists and engineers had been driven out of the country by the dictator Mao Zedong during the 60s and 70s. But over the next few decades, new Chinese leaders pushed to catch up. By the 1990s, the Cold War was over. The US had become friendlier with China, and it had lifted most of its export controls. And so China enticed many chip companies to move their assembly operations to China. And by the 2000s, China dominated this end of the supply chain. But China was importing more and more chips to feed its assembly industry, and it put them in a tricky position.
The Chinese government had studied the tech supply chain, and they realized the entire Chinese tech ecosystem relied on a foundation of imported silicon from China's geopolitical adversaries, from the United States, from Japan, from Taiwan, and China's leaders concluded, quite understandably, that this was a risk they were unwilling to continue to take.
So the Chinese government poured money into its own chip design and manufacturing companies, which increasingly partnered with non-Chinese firms, all in the hopes of creating a chip supply chain that existed entirely within China.
They've been playing a long game
Ahead
for
of the game.
decades, haven't they, China?
Just way ahead of the
Yeah.
game.
It's mad, isn't it?
Yep.
There's definitely been a concerted, plan over a certain amount of decades to dominate certain industries, I think.
Yeah.
Wonder when that year is going to come to fruition, where it's like, here we are. That day of saying, now we own the world. Now we're the largest.
I don't know. A lot of it's fickle because I know they own a hell of a lot of Africa, don't they, China?
Yep.
But only as in times of peace. If things sort of go wrong and there is a major conflict and people just go, I'm having that bit now. You've got to be able to defend all of your land, essentially, don't you? So if they've got like one of the mineral rich bits of North Africa where people are getting cobalt and all this other sort of stuff, and then America just go, oh, we're having that now.
Yeah,
Because we're at a war.
The US don't stand still; they keep advancing all the time. So they're absolutely well into technology and things like that. They're not. I know China do well, and they've been doing well because they've got they've got a lower place to come from, China, haven't they? The US has been miles more than advanced in China for a long time.
Yep.
So China just getting up to the level where technically they should be, I suppose, for the things that they've got in place.
Yeah.
But
I'm not sure. China's such a big global influence now.
of course,
huge,
that
massively.
you don't know, even to the fact of, when they were talking about the 5G towers and Huawei and people like that,
Yeah.
they're just, flying balloons over the USA now and shit. It's, I don't know.
I saw that was a headline of a paper when I went in the supermarket before, and it was saying, forget your balloons flying hundreds of feet over America. We've got masts that are 20 feet above your head that are monitoring everything you're doing in the UK.
I think it's one of those things with China. I think they should be careful what they wish for as well.
Yeah.
Because they keep doing things like this, then more and more people out the US and other big European countries everywhere around the world, they're going to start taking their manufacturing and start doing it somewhere else.
Well,
That's what I mean.
Yeah, that's what COVID has done.
It's like
But it might
Russia,
be too late.
it's like Russia with oil supplies and gas supplies. They'll shoot themselves in the foot eventually because people just say we're just going to go somewhere else for it. Simple as that.
Yeah.
But the main countries will go somewhere else, but that won't take away from your other developing countries like India, places like that will also purchase from them.
To a certain extent, they'll still go for the cheaper option. I'll absolutely get that.
And then the Chinese made goods sort of like make it to the black market still cheaper than what other manmanufacturers are. And that's the whole reason behind collapsing manufacturing a lot of the time.
Yeah,
they have to go back.
It's been a big thing for years, hasn't it? Made in China, and this has been going on since the 70s and 80s, hasn't it?
Yeah,
everything's
They're
made over there.
way ahead of the game, aren't they?
Yeah,
they make pretty tasty food as well, don't they?
Soon, China could design, manufacture, and assemble some older generations of chips, mostly on its own. But it was still years away from making the most cutting-edge chips. This is one of those chips. It's got around 114 billion transistors on it.
Jeez.
Remember, in 1960, chips had 4.
Computing capabilities of the future.
That's probably in your phone.
Wow.
That level of technology.
How many did he say?
114 billion, was it? Or 140 billion?
Just go back. How many did he say there? I just want to see that.
604.
Remember, in 1960, chips had 4.
Oh, you missed
At
it.
around This is one of those chips. It's got around 114 billion transistors on it.
114
Remember, in
billion.
1960, chips had.
Now, if you're getting 114
Crazy.
billion chips,
It's doubling every
in that
year.
tiny little bit like that, right? I don't want to start the conspiracy theories out, but when you get that jab in your arm,
Oh, no, you can't say that. You can't say that.
You'd know if that went
It's
in.
a joke.
I mean, it's still a bit big.
It's a joke.
we're talking when you jab him in the arm like that.
Yeah, when you get punched in the arm.
Yeah,
Don't start that.
Yeah. Yeah. Keep us monetized, please.
4.
Computing capabilities of the future, just like the computing capabilities of the past, will be deployed to military uses.
The problem is only a few companies in the world are involved in making them, and none are in China. To start, only 3 American companies make the software needed to design advanced chips. Then, turning those designs into real chips requires a machine that's only made by one company, ASML. But this machine requires equipment that's only made in the US. Finally, only companies in Taiwan and South Korea can put it all together and manufacture the most advanced processor chips. These companies are choke points in the supply chain, and China was totally reliant on them for advanced chips. In 2019, police in the US went to arrest Zhang Chengyu, but they couldn't find him. Until he appeared later, in China, as the CEO of his company that successfully made software like ASML's. Thanks to help from the Chinese government, his company was flourishing. And his story was just one of several instances of IP theft in the chip industry.
The Chinese government has been, at the very least, passively supportive, but in some cases actively supportive of IP theft, because the Chinese government realizes that its companies are in a position of relative weakness.
In order to eventually decrease its reliance on this foreign supply chain, China was identifying choke points like ASML and copying them. But the plan backfired.
And this has really angered U.S. government and other governments and caused them to take China's subsidies as a more security-focused issue rather than just an economic issue.
This was happening at the same time that the relationship between the US and China was becoming less cordial and more competitive.
China's market distortions and the way they deal cannot be tolerated. A tremendous intellectual property theft situation.
Game on here, a trade war between the United States and China.
Trump says he plans to impose a 10% tariff increase on China.
If they don't want to trade with us anymore, that would be fine with me.
In 2018, the Trump administration banned US companies from selling components to ZTE, a Chinese tech company. Then in 2019, it banned US companies from doing business with China's biggest tech company, Huawei, and its affiliates. These bans nearly bankrupted ZTE and dealt a significant blow to Huawei. In 2022, the next US president, Joe Biden, targeted China's chip industry more broadly. First, it banned all US companies from selling advanced chips to China. But it also blocked Chinese design companies from using US-made design software and US-made manufacturing equipment. Plus, it banned global companies who use US semiconductor technology from selling advanced chips to China as well. The US was exploiting these choke points to stop China's chip industry in its tracks.
These export controls represented a really clear shift away from the view that ultimately trade and tech exchanges with China were fundamentally positive sum to a much more zero-sum view of the technological competition.
Next, the US passed a law that would invest billions of dollars into its own chip manufacturing companies, and finalized a deal with Taiwan's biggest manufacturer, TSMC, to build manufacturing plants in the US, all to enable the US to keep racing ahead.
China and the US have a pretty similar view of the political stakes when it comes to semiconductors. That's why the US government has made it a priority to defend the US lead.
But this has also put extraordinary pressure on another conflict between the two countries. Since 1949, China has viewed Taiwan as a breakaway province and has vowed to reunite with it, even threatening invasion. The US has vowed to protect Taiwan, but Taiwan also happens to own the most important choke point in the chip supply chain. Taiwanese companies manufacture 63% of all chips and about 92% of all advanced chips. With companies that are indispensable to both the US and Chinese chip industries, Taiwan has built itself some protection. But the US export controls forced Taiwan's companies to make a choice: defy the US and keep selling to China, or comply and cut off China from some of its chips. So far, they've signaled they'll cut off China. But as China and the US feud over chips, more and more choices like these are going to be imposed on countries and companies around the world, asking them to pick sides in what looks a lot like a new Cold War.
Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's quite scary stuff, actually,
isn't
isn't
it? Yeah. You see why there's a lot of focus on Taiwan now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes a bit more sense. But I know the states definitely want their political system, want the world to be reliant on them and them only for a lot of things, like gas and oil. Or
I think
big
maybe
one
it's just the main things. It's mainly other things you're going to import anyway. You always are, aren't you? But I think the main fundamentals of getting by every day, you want to be self-sufficient, really, don't you? Ideally,
or us reliant on,
especially when you're dealing with
versus
sort of like
China.
Places in the world that are a bit more volatile, like your China's and Russia's and places like that. It's it just shows with Russia now, doesn't it, that with the gas supplies, it can be a big thing, can't it? You have your supply turned off just like that.
So with China, when they make shit, you can get anything you want in China. Anything.
Yeah,
but it's not yours for long. Like the intellectual property, just
still
it's gone the second you outsource.
Still got to have somewhere to sell it to. And the US is like the biggest economy in the world, isn't it? Simple as
biggest
that.
consumers.
And the biggest consumers are probably there. I don't know. Could be wrong, but probably certainly one of their biggest markets. I would think China.
Yeah, but when you look at everything in the supply chain from the what they're paying the workers in China to what you're paying them in America.
Yeah.
So if you take it in the house in America, and,
prices go through the roof.
Of course, inflation goes up, and then it's a problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
Then also it's a bit.
But China's a progressing economy and getting bigger and bigger. Then then people expect to be paid more the bigger the economy goes.
That's what communism.
That's what communism's for, mate. They expect it, but they get told, sit down.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Yeah.
Part of the machine.
I know that's part of it, but
Yeah.
human beings are human beings, and if they see what's happening, the country getting richer, then
You know,
they've not seen in the last 2 billion years, have they?
We've not heard of a revolution before
in China.
Yeah, I know what you mean. But it's really interesting. That good one.
That Taiwan thing is concerning, isn't it? For sure.
Goes to show, doesn't it? I mean, that 114 billion
transistors
on that.
That's
and it
crazy.
doubles every year.
And it's smaller than what it was when it had 4 on it.
Surely it's got more than it needs now.
Everything's speeding up in it. And then you've got AI that's coming into play now. So
how much do you need, though, of anything? Like, did technology peak and then everything else is just fluff on top of it?
Can't be now. When you look at AI and GPT and all that, it's like...
Does it make us any better?
Does it make it more convenient?
As a society?
Watching movies on your phone, does it make it any better?
No, makes it worse.
Than watching it on a movie screen or whatever. It's just a technology, and it's technology advancing.
That's what I mean, though. Did it get good enough, and then, like anything, it just keeps getting better and better? But the rewards sort of maybe tails off of the technology
absolutely
getting better.
Get what you mean. Yeah, I mean the advancement in just electric, and then like things like computers, mobile phones and stuff. Things like that's just been absolutely huge, hasn't it?
It's great. I mean, you look at technology. I can go on a plane now and travel somewhere and watch the match on my phone.
Yeah.
Or sat on a train somewhere traveling where you can't, you're not going to carry a TV onto the train.
No.
Plug it in and try and get the aerial to work.
Like a really, really long extension lead.
Yeah.
But maybe at one point,
I've got one of them that's on the roll.
maybe you just have a big screen that everyone watches the game together and there's a few beers on a plane.
It's called a pub.
Exactly.
On a plane.
Yeah.
But then again, you can't get everyone around that screen that's on there.
I think the advancement in the last 100 years has been the biggest at the moment. It's probably going to be, because it's been absolutely huge from where we were.
It's still
in the
going
1900s
exponentially.
up to now.
It's still going exponentially, advances in technology, isn't it? You look at phones, what they can do in the processing power, it's still, the curve's going like that.
Yeah, we're only talking about small little technology bits, but we use every day as consumers.
Yeah.
Forget about the technology that's all to do with like spying and, and
I think it can make technology better, like phones
military
better,
hardware.
but it's come out with something new that's, like you say, going to improve things.
Yeah.
You've got phones now, they're getting quicker. The photo, the cameras get better and things like that. But
what about people who've got like amputated arms and now they've got arms that they can go like that on?
That's amazing.
That's technology.
Yeah.
And that's advancement, and that's,
You're only referencing phones and stuff and TVs, but I'm talking about all kinds of technology that goes right across the board, from everything.
I'm not sure.
Across that circuit board.
I'm not sure ChatGPT is really the future or needed in this day and age.
What about if you've got no voice?
Does Stephen Hawking didn't have a voice, did he? That was decades ago that he had a digital voice.
Yeah, but he's got that digital voice. It doesn't sound very good. Now you want a digital voice that sounds with an accent. It sounds like someone's talking.
But like ChatGPT is taking, like, kids don't have to write about anything. If they need to do an essay on something now for school or college, they just go on ChatGPT, type it in, it does it for them, and that's that.
Would you have preferred that when you were at school?
Oh, hell yeah. I would have been a straight A student.
There you go.
But I would have been
There's the answer.
I would have been much stupider.
We weren't even allowed to use a calculator.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, nothing.
Alien technology calculators. That's why.
There you go. Right. Anyway,
Roswell.
Interesting chat there, right?
Yeah. Enjoyed that.
Hope you guys enjoyed it too. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll catch you on the next one.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.